Hello, good morning. Welcome from Manchester. It's Monday, October the 6th. Can Mel Stride save the Tory party? My name's Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates from Sky News. If yesterday the Tories moved policy in a key area towards reform by promising to pull out of the European Convention of Human Rights, today's speech by the shadow chancellor will provide the clearest answer yet, they hope, of what policy differences between the two parties there are. They believe fiscal rectitude and the contrast that gives with Reform UK on spending is the answer. But benefit cuts and aid cuts on the menu, just how distinctive is this offer in practice?
So it's Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride's big day, and kudos to Team Stride for sending us something we haven't seen before. It is a list of 10 things you didn't know about Mel Stride to kick off the day, and they include the fact that Mel is a licensed pilot and scuba diver, reflecting his thrill-seeking side. Perhaps we'll hear more of that in the speech, Sam.
Yes, I didn't know that there was a thrill-seeking side. And it's also always Mel, never Sir Mel, which I always find quite interesting. We've got a lot of knights at the top of British politics. He also has an unpublished novel, Gathering Dust, saved on his laptop, set in the States in the 1960s music scene. Release the novel, I say.
Release the novel. The cry goes up from Tory conference. But as Playbook points out, his early round of TV interviews means he won't be able to start the day with a wild swim this morning. I see, Sam, you're going to have a go in your running kit.
If you haven't done a podcast and a park run and a TV interview before 9 a.m, and what are you doing at party conference season? Anyway, talking of events, I just want to give you a bit of housekeeping. If you are here in Manchester at Tory conference, well, we've got something for you at 4:00 today, because you'll want to know what Tory members actually think about Nigel Farage and Reform, and should the Tories and Reform UK do something to try and stop the two parties duking it out at the next election and splitting the right again? Should Kemi Badenoch remain leader into the next general election? We will reveal the results of an exclusive Sky News, Politico, YouGov Tory members poll, which will tell you what Tory members think about all of these things. So come and see you and me at 4:00 in the Politico pub, which is in the exhibition hall. At that point, at 4:00, Patrick English, brilliant Patrick of YouGov, will join us and we will set out those results. And I can tell you, Anne, you are going to want to see that, because I have, and they're quite jaw-dropping.
And never fear, if you're not in Manchester, of course, we will be following up on that and telling you all about it on the podcast. The question of how the Tories deal with Reform UK is really the existential one at this conference. Does it fight reform? Does it avoid competing directly with Nigel Farage? And how does it avoid what happened in 2024 when the right was split and the consequences were, well, not so many Tory MPs knocking around at this conference? The position of Kemi Badenoch is that pacts with Reform UK are not on the cards. That was clear, Sam, when I spoke with her last week. She was just in her way very clear that she was against it on the grounds that whatever anybody said about the parties moving together, there were too many differences of approach, of attitude, of philosophy, as well as some policy with reform. But there are some who are giving far more equivocal answers, and I think you caught up with one.
Yes, that's right, Anne. It's a little bit of an exclusive for this podcast. I grabbed one of the most prominent shadow cabinet members yesterday, arguably the most prominent shadow cabinet member. That, of course, is Robert Jenrick, one-time leadership contender. In the future, who knows? Maybe he'll be a leadership contender again. But we have long been told that Robert Jenrick is just a little bit more sympathetic to the idea of making sure that the right isn't split at the last election. Indeed, you might remember a few months ago, I had that leaked recording of him at a dinner where he made some overtures in that direction. So I grabbed him yesterday in the exhibition hall to ask him this, might be kind of my favourite question for Robert Jenrick. And I want you to listen to the answer and to listen how equivocal he is and how he sets out what he thinks.
Look, Kemi has been very clear, as in fact has Nigel Farage, that we're not in the business of pacts and deals.
What about you?
I don't think there's going to be a deal, and I don't think that's the right approach.
Do you think you don't think it's...
No. What we've got to do as a party is change. We've got to learn the lessons of the past. We let people down when we were in office. We've got to learn the lessons, change the party, and win those people back. I want the Tory party to be once again the natural home for all the small C Conservatives out there in the country.
Never
and I
support,
believe
you
we
would
can do
never
that.
support a pact of any sort.
Look, that is not our priority. That's not our priority. What I want to do now is just focus on changing the Tory party, changing so that we can win back the support that we lost at the general election.
So there you go. I think him saying a pact is not a priority is probably the bit that gets in the headline here. Now, he says lots of different things that slightly nuance in different directions. He does say, I don't think a deal or a pact is the right approach, but he also implies that that's because the focus at the moment has to be on change. So I nevertheless think that the not a priority line is the one that will be heard. And when I read the transcript to Shadow Cabinet colleagues last night, let's just say that their faces contorted in several different directions because they know what he's doing. They know he is sending a signal. They know he's, shall we say, bulging out from the line that the rest of them are mostly taking. What do you make of it?
I make of it precisely that. Well, also congratulations for actually catching up with Robert Jenrick, who's been very good for someone who's so noisy on social media about not getting electronically tagged in order to reply to journalists so far at this conference. But I think what he was saying there, as you say, he wanted to make the claim that he was interested, as are they all, in reconnecting with natural small c Conservatives out there in the country. But when you were pressing on what that could mean, deal, no deal, the use of the word priority just absolutely leaps out, doesn't it? I mean, also, frankly, if you wanted to do something, you could still say it wasn't a priority right now, but it would in no way cut you off from it in the way that most people, most shadow cabinet, have been tasked to go out and basically put that one to bed. So there's always a little trail of breadcrumbs, isn't there, whenever you catch up with Robert Jenrick, as you very credibly did. Shall we turn to Mel Stride there, because it is his big day today, after the 10 things we now know about Mel. And the Shadow Chancellor will identify what he says would be 47 billion of potential budget cuts, almost half of that to be made up from slashing the welfare bill, still further from anything that Labour have put on the table. Another 7 billion to be hacked off the foreign aid budget. That would take it to just a mimsy 0.1% of GDP, almost half of current spending in an area that has already had a massive cuts from that original target of 0.7%. That was a long-standing argument in the Conservatives, wasn't it, Sam? Which really sort of, which side are you on? Kind of Billy Bragg for the Conservative Party, of whether you were a progressive Conservative who'd like to be outward-facing and supportive of foreign aid, or whether you didn't mind taking a hatchet to it. I sort of feel now at conference this is going to go down pretty well. What do you reckon?
I think that's right. There are Tories who are quite grumbly about the foreign aid cuts, but they're not going to do so in public. I mean, the years in which David Cameron used foreign aid spending and kind of holding up foreign aid spending to define a modernised Conservative Party, those arguments are now in the bin. And we have, as you say, I think moved pretty definitively on, and people are not, in large part, going to want to relitigate that in public, certainly not here. It's a long old list of cuts that Mel Stride is going to deliver today. There's going to be, on the welfare side, stopping claims for people with low-level mental health problems, ensuring British citizens can access welfare, although there's an asterisk that I think you'll go into in a moment. There is reversing any lifting of the two-child benefit cap, and on, a reduction in the bloated civil service. I think that's taking back the head count back to 2016 levels of civil service numbers. But there's an irony here, which is, from what I could see scanning all the front pages this morning, one proposal made it on there, and that, Anne, was the proposal to spend. Here we go again, because the Conservatives did not clearly, fascinatingly, did not feel that they could just make a pitch on cuts alone. And there they were, tiptoeing back to to the big old pot to give something positive to say. So, on the front page of the Times, and confirmed to anybody who'll ask, young people will be given a £5,000 national insurance rebate towards the cost of their first home when they get the first full-time job. It's called the First Times Job Bonus to divert national insurance payments into a long-term savings account. It will cost £2.8 billion funded by the cuts and will help 600,000 people a year. But the fact they didn't look like they felt they could win an argument on cuts when honesty and a radical approach is the whole sell here.
I'm less surprised by that. I think listening to the parts of Mel Stride that certainly reminded a lot of older people in the audience, therefore I remember it, it sounded a bit like Peter Lilly's Gilbert and Sullivan, I've got a little list, of everybody who was going to lose more if the Tories got into power. So that was tough, Mel. But I think there was always going to be a trade-off here. I don't think, Sam, that the Conservatives wanted to go away just saying, oh, by the way, you're all having quite a tough old time under Labour, or you're worried about it, or worried about this and that rage from Labour. So, here's a few more cuts that we're going to bring to you. So it fits with something that Mel Stride has been quite vocal about in Shadow Cabinet and has built a bit of a coalition behind. And the first job bonus, yes, you're right, it's something you have to spend 2.8 billion-ish on, if indeed it ever comes into being. But it's symbolic of something that I think he wants to say, which is that the Conservatives need to have more of a message for younger people, and particularly the very young voters. Probably their first default choice is not going to be to rush to the Conservative Party, but that there are voters who are beginning to settle down, getting the first home, thinking about family, or just want to be secure and professionally successful. Can the Conservatives really start to drive a wedge between Labour and them on that group on this issue? So the big question there would be, if you want to fund this in order to send that signal, are you really sure that anything like this in practice would happen? You're moving money from one column of difficulty, welfare cuts, assessing mental health claims, to being able to give people money in first jobs and buying first homes. There's quite a lot of friction to get there. And the other one, I mean, I will, fair warning, Mel Stride, I'm going to ask you this when I interview you tomorrow, is why don't you just, go after the triple lot then, if you think that there's a big problem in terms of the distribution of goods between your older voters and the ones that you feel you need to get back or appeal to, sort of 30 to 45 to 50s. Well, why don't you just do more of an adjustment in that direction? Strangely enough, that didn't make it into conference.
I think that's a great question. What I like about Mel Stride's plans as a political journalist trying to explain them to the voters, it's not an ideological view, it's just a practical one, is that what he is talking about are tangible things that voters can understand. Not in a patronising way, but let me explain. Because all of the plans that we had yesterday were all about process. So you're leaving the European Convention of Human Rights. It's quite an ephemeral process thing. What does it mean in practice? Well, there are some promises further down the line about migration, but they promise a lot on how to do things. Today, we've got something on what the consequences will be. So that I actually found quite refreshing. But still, I think there are political challenges in this Treasury space. In particular, listeners to this podcast, you better than anybody else will know that I bore on a almost daily basis about the biggest challenge in politics being the 20 to 30 billion pound black hole which Rachel Reeves has to fill on November the 26th, largely through tax, which I think is an existential moment for the government and for the country. And I really do think it's no smaller challenge than that. But the question I was asking some people last night is, how do the Tories make sure that they rise to that moment? And if there is criticism and sort of public reaction against the government to this, that the Tories are the beneficiary. Now, I'm told that they don't feel the need to come up with an alternative plan to that. But my question remains, how do the Tories benefit from criticism of Rachel Reeves and the budget when there are other competing parties and they don't feel the need to match it? I'm just told they need to say she made a series of mistakes and the OBR has been warning that for a long time. I wonder whether that's enough.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the Tories who decided to frame the economic argument in this way. It was Rachel Reeves. And there's a tough end of the Conservative argument. I was just happened to be speaking to someone about it last night. It wasn't their brief, so in fairness to them, I'll sort of I won't say who it was, but who was just saying, well, look, frankly, this whole idea of the black hole's nonsense anyway. Right? It's a construct. It's there. It's a particular way which Labour chose to frame the problems that they would like to say Conservatives left behind in the economy. I mean, you could have framed that a different way. They weren't even denying that there were serious problems hanging over in the economy. Rishi Sunak didn't deny that. He was quite frank that he had, that there was something there that needed to be addressed. But framing it the black hole way, and I don't think you bore on about it. I think you talk about it delightfully, frankly, and with great insight. But either way, it's a problem that goes to Labour, because in the end, if once you've said it, you have to either explain why you're making it smaller or that you're going to make it bigger and why.
I know there's something else that you want to talk about, Anne. So let's hop subjects. One of the stories that is also on the front pages and has been rumbling on, and is a really important one, is why on earth, a couple of weeks ago, the Crown Prosecution Service abruptly dropped the charges against a couple of individuals, Chris Cash, Christopher Berry, who were accused of spying for China. Now, the two men were accused of gathering information and providing it against in a way that's prejudicial to the safety and interests of the state between 2021 and 2023. Right. This has roared back into the headlines over the weekend after the Sunday Times suggested that Keir Starmer's national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, told a secret briefing that Beijing couldn't be deemed an enemy of Britain at the trial, and as a consequence, it collapsed. Now, I have to say this, the government has gone on the offensive and on the record against this story, the Powell allegation. They say, and this bit's in quote marks, there has not been any material change in the evidence provided by the government. As a matter of fact, any evidence submitted for the case can only be from the time that the alleged offences took place in 2021 to 2023, rendering the national security strategy of 2025 unrelated. They absolutely insist that even though there's quite a lot of briefing around the government changing and withdrawing the evidence, this isn't true. Even so, the original Sunday Times version appears to have made it into quite a lot of papers this morning. And what do you make of it all?
I think even if you give, because we don't really know the basis on which the government is making its pushback so strongly, Sam, but even if you assume that they can technically make that argument that this was still the application of the same advice, we know that something happened. We know that there was tension over this case at a very high level between the Foreign Office and the Home Office, and I gather also some parts of the secret services. And it comes down to an argument about how to interpret Britain's relations now with China. There's a very powerful bilateral team, which is sort of the focus of the China UK relationship, sitting inside the Foreign Office. That's where sort of a lot of the detailed policy gets made on that. And broadly speaking, the Foreign Office that stands behind it takes the view that if Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, was heading off to China, you'll remember early in the Keir premiership saying that she wanted to get deals done with Beijing. This was a priority, and basically signalling that we wanted to have what was always going to be, in some ways, fraught relationship with China. It's a mammoth spying power, and it's been very aggressively targeting the UK, but that a degree of sort of understanding would be extended to that in order to pursue our growth and business interests with China. Then that's one way that the relationship would not be seen as just full out hostile. And a comparison that was made by an official to me was, we're not dealing with Iran or Russia here, right? Where clearly you deal with them, talk to them, and you get caught out outside the rules, then there's a condign punishment awaiting you. China seems to have ended up in something of a grey zone here, where the Home Office has been quite unhappy about the way Foreign Office has sort of shaped up this argument, Foreign Office, in fairness, wants to protect its embassy in Beijing, which has a lot of operational difficulties and needs to treat well with the Chinese. Jonathan Powell has always been on that side of the argument, but a lot of people in the Home Office weren't. Why do we know this? Because Dan Jarvis, the security minister, who's not someone who takes wild risks or shoots from the hip, also let it be known that he had concerns that this prosecution had not gone forward, as did Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the Commons. It would appear for now that has been decided, if you like, in terms of the sort of China understanding faction, but it is simmering along there, particularly as there's no sign that there's a decrease in Chinese hostility to the UK in other ways.
The tension between security and trade, the tension between the Home Office and the Foreign Office, and the tension between our desire to say a lot of things and our 20-minute limit are all big things that we have to grapple with on this podcast. So with that, I'm going to bring the shutters down and say thank you very much indeed. Come and see us at 4:00 here in Manchester at the Politico Pub for that event on polling. Otherwise, we'll see you back tomorrow for Politics at Sam and Anne's from Manchester. See you then.
I wish you a happy park run as I slope towards my hotel breakfast.